Dr. Mans, I know you're a renowned economist and you're leading this very dynamic organization that is really known for its grassroots modules and community outreach. When and where do you think development should come in, and how today do you see the paradigm of development changing, and what would be your views on how we get there?
I think what we're seeing now is absolutely unprecedented in Africa. I believe Africa is on the verge of significant transformation. More than 20 countries have grown at over 6% a year on a sustained basis since the 90s. A number of countries have made extraordinary progress against the Millennium Development Goals. You have countries that are staying the course on reform despite the global economic crisis and rebounding with healthy growth rates, with great prospects for the future. You now see in so many countries investment growing, not just foreign direct investment, but investment by citizens. So it's a tremendous opportunity for Africa now. Africa could very well be poised for being able to grow at healthy rates for years to come, with the same kind of transformation that we saw in China 30 years ago, in India 20 years ago, in Brazil 10 years ago. But there are huge risks if Africa is to be able to build on its successes and continue this progress. One of them is HIV/AIDS, and that's key to the work that we do. The work of Africare focuses on empowering communities to lift themselves out of poverty. One of the great challenges they have is HIV/AIDS. Rates are stabilizing, as we've seen from the data, but it nevertheless is true that very few people are getting the treatment that they need. The number of people who are infected by HIV/AIDS every day is more than twice the number of people who are getting antiretroviral treatment. So a lot of the work that we do, give you an example, in South Africa, which is community-based prevention, together with testing, counseling, providing treatment to those who are infected, helping people who are living with HIV/AIDS with income-generating activities, and providing care for AIDS orphans. Doing all of this at the community level by bringing together traditional leaders, the faith community, the research institutions, together with the main hospitals, and working with local governments. By bringing everybody together, taking an integrated approach to dealing with the problem, and putting communities at the center, I think we're making a real difference.
But aren't there challenges? I've read recently that the most countries are way behind reaching their MDG goals. And so what do we do as maybe the donor community, what your organization does, what your think tank does, and the practical part of your programs? How do we get to that? Because without changing that paradigm on the MDGs, then maybe the progress you're talking about is not going to be sustainable.
I agree. I mean, the one that I am especially concerned about, if you look at the long-term challenges for Africa, is the lagging demographic transition. Fertility rates are still very, very high, 6+ for every woman in Africa. And the reason it continues to be so high, or I think the big opportunities to address it, come down to two things, which are at the center of the work that Africa does. One of them is dealing with the problem of child survival rates.
Okay.
Because those rates are very high, fertility rates continue to be very high. And at the heart of addressing this problem is prenatal care, which we're doing in countries like Liberia, dealing with waterborne diseases, diarrhea, which is a very important part of the work that we do at Africare through our work in water. In addition, improving agricultural productivity, especially empowering women, women farmers who are the bulk of farmers across the continent in Africa. So I think, yes, much more work needs to be done on the MDGs. You have only a few countries that are making progress against nearly all of them. One of them is Ghana. But even in Ghana, where they're making great progress on most of the MDGs, there's one where they are lagging severely, and that is MDG number 7, access to clean water and safe sanitation. And so what we're doing at Africare is working in Ghana to help them make progress against the MDGs. We're using this wonderful donation from President Obama to work in the western region, which is where they've found oil and gas, which will start flowing very soon, to help those impoverished communities get access to safe water and good sanitation, which will help them make progress in meeting the MDGs.
Now, you mentioned Ghana, and you've given a great example, and you talked about the Nobel monies that President Obama has provided to Africa and others to do, key projects. But why, on the governance side, do you think that Ghana has been successful on the MDGs? Why don't you comment, and then I'll ask Steve too.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons for the president's first visit to Africa was to Ghana, because it's a country where I think the president said he had an opportunity to sit down with several living presidents.
Yes, that's
because
right.
there's been such an orderly transition of power. But I think what comes along with this is real political competition between parties, real checks and balances, institutions being built on the governance front, which bodes well for the future in Ghana.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree with that, and I'd actually take it to a point you made earlier, Darius, about what is different about Africa today. The Africa that I came to 40 years ago in 1970. Oh my goodness, 41 years ago, was very different, where you had Idi Amin's and John Bedell Bokassa's and Mobutu's and wars for liberation in the South and the Portuguese territories and et cetera. So for all of the conflicts that exist around the continent right now, and we know them well in Somalia and Sudan and Eastern DRC, it is still a millennium jump. It really is from those days. We've come a very, very long way, and Ghana is only one example of governments that have had not only continuing cycles of democratic elections where governments have turned over, Benin and Mali and South Africa and Botswana and et cetera, a number of them that one could name. So Ghana is a great example of that, obviously. Now, it's interesting to me, though, in talking about the Millennium Development Goals, because maybe there's something I don't understand about them, and I know you have a long connection with this, and that is that there are a certain set of criteria that a government or a country has to reach in terms of governance and performance criteria before they'll be eligible for aid under the Millennium system. And that seems to me to often leave out countries that are in dire need of aid and assistance, like a Burundi, which I was just talking about, which is really struggling, doing very well in some senses, but doesn't even begin to meet the criteria for Millennium Challenge grants and et cetera. Tell me about that.
Darius, what is your take on that? Because I think all of us struggle with, we think these are lofty goals, but what's the reality on the ground? And particularly if you're dealing with post-conflict countries and you have this tremendous gap between when people can see tangible development on the ground, what happens in those intervening years? How do you really address MDG when you have these